this day, we can say, a very, very long day of Christmas, proceeding from 4 o'clock today through the Masses tomorrow. Not only are there so many Masses, just a number of celebrations, but there are so many different sets of readings speaking to the significance of this most holy day. Readings that progress anywhere from Luke's accounts that we call the Christmas story to the last gospel that we hear tomorrow, the great prologue of John, the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. But today we start off the Vigil Mass of Christmas with the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, with its great genealogy account we've just heard. What a gospel to inspire joy than a long reading of names, right? Why does the church do this? Well, I can give a couple answers. The more pithy one is that it's your last act of penance for Advent. Before the reforms of the Council and earlier in the history of the liturgy, this Vigil of Christmas was still a penitential Mass. That's why it's the only gospel that doesn't immediately speak of the birth of Jesus. But we get the setup. Normally in the past we'd still be wearing violet vestments and you'd still have to come back at Mass either at midnight or tomorrow. But now this is a Mass of Christmas, and yet it's still the setup. Okay, that's the pithy response. The church doesn't assign the genealogy as a penance. But it's so boring, right? I mean, we like the Christmas story of Luke or the high eloquence of John, but what are we to take from a long list of names? Growing up, I used to find discussion of my own genealogy as boring as could be. After all, why would I care about my ancestors who were long dead before I was born? So in that light, I certainly don't want to listen to a list of someone else's ancestors. But as we grow older, we come to realize more and more that these abstract pasts do have significance for us now. If we never stop to think of it in a more significant way, the first realization of this might be as one is inevitably questioned by a doctor in middle age. Does your family have a history of heart disease or cancer? Is there a pattern of good health qualities or bad ones that run through my family? Somehow I do inherit things from my family line. But as we go deeper, we discover other trends. My grandfather died when I was a baby, so I have no memory of him. But throughout my life, I've come to realize that he is my predecessor. So many qualities about me that aren't reflected in other members of my family come from him. Everyone older than me in the family sees me as his spitting image, even if I never knew him. And so, in many ways, as I learn about my grandfather, I learn about myself. Going further back, I can see that my family trees go so many generations branching throughout the world. From one side of the family, I'm a 7th generation Texan. From the two sides, there's some mixed blood from England and Ireland, but the dominant bloodlines from both sides are German. One side from Bavaria, the other side from Bohemia in the modern-day Czech Republic. And like so many families who immigrated to the U.S. at some point, my last name, Bame, spelled now with 4 letters, is a simplified, Americanized spelling of an original German name mixed in with family bloodlines such as East, Reynolds, and Gunther. But more than mere facts, for all this data that I can supply, my family's story consists of many people with their own rich stories. My own life, no matter how turned in on myself I may get at times, my life is not the only one that's dramatic. My own family tree is full of stories of people wealthy and poor, wise and foolish, humble, and hearty. All of this culminates in my two parents, from whom I derived everything I knew of God's love and goodness growing up. And as their only child, their love contributed me as their gift to the world. Whether or not the world sees me as a beautiful gift or a white elephant gift is up to its own determination. And so, if my own genealogy and yours has significance, how much more so for that of Jesus? Whether every name listed in that family tree is accurate is ultimately not important. Some, after all, will note there are some discrepancies in the family line offered by Matthew versus the one offered by Luke. Some names differ. The number of generations differ. And of course, we should note, even as Matthew hit it right in the face, the numbering of the generations was symbolic. 14 was a significant number of numerology of the name of David. It's much like when everyone you know claims to have descended from some great historical figure or celebrity. Is everyone really descended from Alexander the Great? Or are they descended from some guy named Alexander who was really quite ordinary? But what is important in the story of Jesus' family is that the Son of God, divinity itself, has chosen to take on human flesh. The immaculate flesh of the Immaculate Virgin Mary, yes, but the very DNA of a long human story. His Davidic lineage isn't even entirely by blood, but through adoption in Joseph's line, which the ancient world considered as equally valid. Nonetheless, the story of Jesus' family tree includes kings and peasants, saints and terrible sinners, prostitutes, adulterers, murderers, and conquerors. Jesus does not inherit the sins of his predecessors, just as we do not. But he is born into a family shaped by the consequences of those who have gone before him. And thus he chooses to be born of a teenage girl, found to be pregnant, even though she has not yet been taken to her husband's home. His adoptive father must choose whether to divorce his wife or be mocked as a fool. He's told by an angel that he need only trust God. Not only should he trust God and his wife, but take her from Nazareth to Bethlehem for a census. And there is no mail-in balloting, so he must take her 75 to 90 miles to Bethlehem. They have no accommodations. She has to give birth in a cave. And shortly thereafter, they will be hunted by a jealous king who will slaughter babies indiscriminately to make sure that his power and control are not upset by an unplanned, unwelcomed birth. They'll have to live as refugees in a foreign land until it's safe to come home. There is nothing sanitized about that story. The Holy Family goes through great trials, as we do. And God chooses to be born in this situation. Not only a random human situation, but one whose story has been prepared and woven throughout human history as God prepared through centuries and millennia for this moment to strike. These are the particulars of the events surrounding Jesus' birth. But the Word is made flesh to take on the totality of our human situation. If Jesus were born in the flesh today, it would no doubt be to a family among bombings and shellings, or a family fleeing persecution, or a family struggling to afford to put food on the table or keep the lights on. He would be born on the streets of Houston among the homeless, or in a home torn by grief. He would be born despite the attempt of an abortionist knife, or of a government order that declares him as an undesirable. This isn't political. The truth of Christmas is that the Word took on our flesh, all of it. The fullness of our suffering, our weakness, our danger, and while himself being without sin, he nonetheless bore the full weight of the consequences of our selfishness, negligence, our lack of charity and concern, our violence, and our pride. He took on flesh that would eventually be scourged, spat upon, and pierced. This sounds less than joyful. But the writer John Eldredge compares this event, this mystery of Christmas, through the events or the lens of the events of World War II. And in his metaphor, the nativity of the Lord is not the day of victory. That, of course, would be Easter. It's not the end of the war, it's victory, but it's D-Day. The desperate hour when all seems lost, but God invades and establishes a front, a new front, on the war to redeem all human flesh. And our destiny is forever changed. The Church Fathers tell us, in the mystery of so many who couldn't bring themselves to see that God could take on all these negative things, and pointed out that what was not assumed by God could not be redeemed. So he had to come, and he had to take on our mess, my mess, your mess. And now he is here to save us. Christmas is indeed D-Day, the day when the Lord slipped through enemy lines and came to his people to lead them, to lead us to victory and freedom. The Lord comes to his broken people in humility and becomes one of them, one of us, so that we might know him and be restored to relationship with him again. Brothers and sisters, we do not celebrate a birthday today. We do not commemorate an event, but we marvel in a mystery that God has come intimately close to us to show us the love of the Father so that we may be saved. The famous hymn that we sing describes Christmas as a silent night. But I find that rarely do we experience it this way. There will be commotion, the family gatherings, the yelling, the squeals of delight of children, the opening of gifts. So many things that will come, good things, in the coming hours. But I'm reminded of a couple years ago when I first visited the grotto of the Nativity in Bethlehem. The grotto is underneath the old basilica and holds the very site marked where Christ was born. A site that normally bustles with pilgrims and tourists passing by to see a spectacle, but I had the chance to experience it in the world of stillness caused by COVID. In the grotto, I had the chance to sit in silence for some 20 minutes. Minimal activity. In the silence of where Christ came into our reality. The night of our dear Savior's birth was anything but uneventful for Mary and Joseph, but it may have seemed silent to an unperceiving world. And so, before the commotion of our Christmas festivities, may we take a few moments of silence to comprehend the new life that has come into the world for us and rejoice. Come, let us adore him.